thank you all also for coming. Just a quick few words on the Himalayan Club. The club is now 82 years old, and I thought I'll just throw some dates at you so that we can look back at what's happened at the club over the years. It was in 1924, the subject of the day when Mallory and Irwin disappeared on Everest. 4 years later, in 1928, the Himalayan Club was formed. And Sudhir Sai, who was a local secretary of ours at the club many years back in 78, he organized a very interesting talk on the same subject, which had Noel Odell as the chief guest. Noel Odell was the last person to see Mallory and Irwin alive, and he was the chief guest at the 50th anniversary of the Himalayan Club. So the club does have a long history, and it's nice to see that these talks have been taking place over the years.
And we have Sudhir with us.
Sudhir is with us. Sudhir, if you could just stand up, he organized the last talk 40 years back. Okay, I'll now request Mandip Soin to please introduce Conrad.
Well, good evening all. It's wonderful to see young and old alike. And as we were fretting around trying to get some chairs, which obviously ran out, I thought it was so appropriate to say 3 chairs more for Conrad. As chair of the South Asia chapter of the Explorers Club, I'd like to welcome Conrad Anker this evening. And like Maninder, I need to tell you a little bit about the Explorers Club. This is 107 years old and promotes scientific explorations in land, sea, air and space. Basically the club sort of was formed in the US, and it encourages exploration and the quest for knowledge. And that's where I think we have a connect with Conrad, who comes from our wider community of climbers, because really this expedition is all about solving the mystery, or trying to solve it, and the quest of knowledge. Explorers Club also has a tradition of actually granting expedition flags, or the Explorer Club flags. And in India, we were lucky to have done this in an expedition to Ladakh. This was in 1984, where 1994, sorry, where we actually opened a particular route. And the important thing is that the patron of that expedition was Sir John Hunt, who's also the leader of the Everest expedition that was successful. Anyhow, there have also been many famous members of the Explorers Club, right from Robert Peary, Roald Amundsen, Hillary and Tenzing, Jacques Cousteau and Sylvia Earle, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and now we are trying to promote that sense in India of exploration, of getting scientific knowledge and adding it to the wider community of climbers and explorers. In India, of course, we've also got people like Rakesh Sharma, who's a cosmonaut, so from a wider range of people. So we would encourage you, between the Himalayan Club and the Explorers Club, to go out there and get inspired by people like Conrad, who of course is a person we've known for several years, and he's a rock climber, a mountaineer, and an author. And as his specialty, which runs on his website, simply put, is climbing the most technically challenging terrain in the world, from Alaska to the Antarctic, from Himalaya to Patagonia. The expedition that he's going to now, which is Meru, which is a route called the Shark Fin, and I just requested him to put in a few slides at the end of this presentation, would just show you the seriousness of the route. And I think the incredible, indomitable spirit of climbers, which gets him back to try and finish that route. He missed it last time by just 200 meters, but they're back again to finish a job, which I think was obviously very well started. And Conrad is also a brand ambassador for the North Face. It's the kind of gear you would love to wear if you go into any of the departmental stores abroad, and I think it's soon to be coming in India. And he's also the brand ambassador for Timex watches. And of course, today he will tell us all about the famous 1924 expedition where George Mallory and Irwin died on their attempt to Everest. So the question is whether they made the summit or they didn't. And of course, Conrad stumbled on the bodies. They were on an expedition that was looking for, solving this riddle. I think some of you might have even read Jeffrey Archer's book, which talks of this whole story. And Mallory, for most of us as a household word, would be the person who said, when asked, why do you want to climb Mount Everest? And he said, because it's there. So those were probably the most, famous 3 words that were in mountaineering history. Incidentally, also on that expedition, apart from the connection we had with Noel Odell, who came and addressed our club, for some of you who ever get the chance to go to the Royal Geographical Society in UK, there is a lovely print of the Everest North Face, painted by Howard Somervell on that expedition in 1924 from the Rongbuk Glacier, and it's one of the most delightful paintings that you can ever lay your hands on. They do have prints which they sell. I think that's a classic. So with that, I think the other one line I thought we should capture for Conrad's sort of outlook, which again I think you put on your website is, or perhaps people have put for you, Conrad, is Conrad's favorite destination is where there is adventure, the open road. Conrad loves his wife's salads, James Bond movies, organic cashews, and his motto is be good, be kind, be happy. So, ladies and gentlemen, over to Conrad and his team, who is not here at the moment because they've lost some bags in transit. He is joined with Renan Ozturk and Jimmy Chin, 2 highly acclaimed climbers and photographers, and Chris, who will accompany them to base camp. And hopefully we have a story the next time round when we trap him for another talk on his ascent of Mount Meru. So over to you, Conrad. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. We have a few more chairs here. Sering, please come have a seat. My friend Sering from Namche is here, so anyhow, this is Sering walking up. His father was a high altitude climber, so we've got lots of connection here. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And please grab a seat if you would like a seat, and if you're young, take a chance to sit down. So, but the if you want to see, you might want to switch around. You'll have to swing around there. But the peak that Mandip mentioned is Meru Peak, and this is what we're here to go have a go at climbing. And I tried it in 2003, then again in 2008, and this will be my 3rd time in 2011. And it's in the Garhwal area. This is Bhagirathi. Really beautiful, striking peak there. And we set out to climb this in 2003 with a small amount of equipment. It didn't work out, so we then came back with more equipment, so it looked sort of like this, which is climbing with a portal edge, the tips that you put on the side of the mountain, and then you move up on it, and you go from one camp to the next. And so instead of making a tent platform, you bring it up and you crawl in there and sleep. And it's a lot of fun. So it involved big technical climbing, then mixed ice climbing, and there's the summit there. And we got just below that last spire, and we got pummeled by the snow, and eventually we got back to our tent, and this is what we were looking like. We were done. So we turned back, and the beautiful thing is we get to climb 90% of the route, or 95% of the route again, which is a wonderful thing, and also another chance to visit India, which I really enjoy. So we're all going to be, you'll know in about 3 weeks how things went along. So to begin tonight's lecture, I start with Amundsen and Scott and the story of the South Pole. And one might ask, how are they connected? And it really sets the stage for exploration in the previous century, when a lot of these wonderful places had yet to be discovered, or yet to see humans there. We know that Amundsen made it to the pole, and it's coming up on the 100th anniversary thereof. And then about 38 days later, Scott made there, and you can see him here in the center of the picture, and they're not too happy. The Norwegians had beat them there, and they were really crestfallen. And so after that, they went back, and they never made it back. They perished 8 miles away from the one-ton depot, and it became quite a legend. So Shackleton was also part of this exploration. He was there in 1907 with Scott, but then didn't make it. And he decided to come back and to have his own adventure, which would be to drop off on the Atlantic Ocean side and then walk all the way across the continent and then to be picked up on the Pacific Ocean side. And that would sort of be this a real challenge, something that wasn't done by humans until the mid-1980s. They left just as the Great War, the First World War, was starting, and they sailed south. They got to South Georgia, a whaling outpost in the South Atlantic, and the whalers there had commented that the pack ice was as thick as they'd ever seen it, and this is the ice that forms every winter, and it impedes ships from being able to do what they're meant to do, which is to sail on open water. So the ship was held fast by the currents and the ice, and it wasn't able to move, and eventually the men never set foot on the continent. They had to winter over on the ice on the ship, and things were fine. They thought, well, when spring comes, we'll still be able to push on, but the ice began to move, and it pushed the boat out just like a cork would out of a bottle that has too much pressure. And it then capsized, and it crunched, and that was the end of the boat. And so Shackleton's great story went from walking across the continent to one of just barely keeping himself and the 26 men that he was with alive. And so they eventually had this 17-month odyssey of a crushed boat, going on the pack ice then breaking up, drifting around the ocean on a flow of ice, making landfall to Elephant Island. And eventually at Elephant Island, Shackleton did some great management. He took his strongest men and the most irascible, the ones that were going to be the troublemakers, and he set sail for South Georgia with a distance of 870 miles across the South Atlantic. And he did this in a 24-foot rowboat with 1 barrel of water, and they didn't have GPSs or spots or any of these rescue devices. It was really hard work for them. And Shackleton eventually was able to get to the island, and walked across South Georgia, and brought a ship in from Chile to effect a rescue. And it's this wonderful story that sort of sets the stage of what exploration was like in the 1920s. And Shackleton, aside from being a great story, is one of those stories that you can keep with you. You keep it close to your pocket, in your heart, when you think, well, if things are tough, i.e. there was traffic today, or you missed your flight, your luggage didn't show up on time, or heaven forbid you don't get cell phone reception, it's really no big deal. These guys got seals and penguins for a period of 17 months. So I'm always like, yeah, we're soft. Shackleton and those guys were tough. So the story of Everest begins here in India. This is great. This is the first time I've presented, and hopefully not the last time, in Delhi and other places. I like to also present in Mumbai. But the story ties into India, and it begins with Peak 15, which was part of the Royal Trigonometric Survey, which took place in the 1850s. And a surveyor started at the tip of India, down south, and then walked continually north using theodolites and a brass chain to measure everything. It's this great story of exploration, if you like these stories, and map making. And they got to within 90 miles of Peak 15. They measured it at 29,002 feet, which is less than 1/10 of 1% error in their measurement, which is pretty remarkable. And this was in 1862. The fellow that was in charge of the survey named it after his predecessor, Sir George Everest. And of course, Mr. Everest didn't want the mountain named after him, but it seems like a very fitting name because it never seems to rest. It's ever present. So it's sort of a combination of a couple of words. So the English, having lost out on the South Pole to the Norwegians, and it was at the time the English Empire was as big as it ever was. It was a lumbering behemoth, so to say, as one historian pointed out. They decided to climb the third pole, which was Mount Everest. So they set their sights on Everest. But at the time, Nepal was a kingdom, and there was no Westerners that traveled there. So The Viceroy had relations with the Dalai Lama at the time in Tibet, and they then went overland to the north side of Mount Everest, and then climbed Everest, not from here, the classic south side view, but from the north side, following up the sunshade line on the right-hand side up to the summit of the peak there.